Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. I'm a Diggity Dude, Dr. Peptoy Panther, Mr. Slippers, here with the wobbly wildcard Aotearoa's Stephen Adams expert, I would say, and also someone who is well versed in the going-ons of the Aotearoa Breakers, and we are here to talk basketball matters with the NBA season sparking up in the coming days. So wobbly wildcard, how are you feeling about the NBA coming at you?
Pretty fizzed there, mate. Pretty fizzed is an appropriate word to use. It's been a little while. It takes some time to get through that NBA off season, and the NBA have got things down to such a fine point where, you know, the NBA's never out of the headlines. There's always something going on, be it the draft or free agency or summer league or trades going on straight after the playoffs, or you've got bloody preseason and like all sorts. Even the Breakers went over there and played some games, which, by the way, are we still allowed to call them the Aotearoa Breakers, or do we have to qualify that now? I'm not sure. But yeah, fizzed for the NBA season.
Why would we not call them the Aotearoa Breakers?
Well, we could call them the American Breakers, or the Deal Breakers. I don't know. We could go a couple directions on that. We might get into that later.
I mean, considering I just decided that the Warriors were cursed, I'm sure we could have some fun with alternative names for our Aotearoa sporting organisations.
Yeah, it's not easy being a Kiwi team in an Aussie league run by Americans who don't seem to have much of a grasp on whatever. Let's not go in there so early on the podcast.
Rightio. Stephen Adams is doing his thing in the NBA. Their season starts with an away game to the Utah Jazz, then home games against the Washington Wizards and Golden State Warriors. So it's a up and down start for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and we will, I think, like early on, you're going to see what the Oklahoma City Thunder are capable of, not in terms of like, are they going to be a championship team, but you're just going to see if they're going to be a team competing for the playoffs, or if they're going to be a team who is in a rebuilding phase. And, you know, how that, the start of the Thunder's season, I think Wildcard is going to determine what happens in terms of trades and their playing roster, which is going to offer a clear picture about where the Thunder sit. Now, as we twist it into Stephen Adams and focus in on him, what's your gut feeling on how Stephen Adams is going to deal with this season? And by that, do I mean, like, do you see this as a moment where Stephen Adams can step in and go to a neck level and be... Well, he's always been kind of a star player for the Thunder to some extent, but do you see this being a moment where he can emerge as one of the NBA's best players because of that extra responsibility and weight that he has in the Oklahoma City Thunder culture? Or do you think he'll kind of fall away by the wayside if the Thunder don't really find any competitiveness in the deep Western Conference? Just what's your gut feeling about Stephen Adams in this situation with the Thunder?
Few different angles on that one, but I think with Stephen Adams specifically, yeah, I mean, he was a guy who was getting very fringe all-star conversations about him last year. He didn't care. He didn't go out there and try to like rally the troops to everyone come vote for me sort of thing. Like some other players have done in the past. Like it's just not something that bothers him. He's just out there doing his job week in, week out, game in, day in, day out, really, in the NBA schedules as they are. So I don't know that we're going to see any kind of crazy mindset shift from him, but just because of the way that this roster is now built, they probably need him to be more of a factor in a few of the areas that he hasn't always been as consistent in. So specifically scoring, and I mean, I think some of the scoring is going to be well covered if you get guys like Danilo Gallinari playing a lot of games, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, if he can take another stride forward from an impressive rookie campaign with the Clippers last year. So I think scoring is one where you would expect him to be more consistent. You'd expect him to be scoring double figures most nights. I don't know that you're going to see him suddenly having games where, like, other than the odd like outlier where he's scoring 30 points or anything like that. But I think the one aspect where you really see him take a new level, like go to a new level, and this is what my first Kiwi Steve in the NBA article this season is going to be about, and I'm so curious to see how it goes. Is I think rebounding is going to be the main factor for him. Because as everyone knows, last 3 years, Russell Westbrook has just been off the chains of his leash. He's been going out there great. And Adams' whole thing was like he'll just take care of the big guy. He'll box him out and create room for Westbrook to swoop through, take the rebound, and run directly forward. Well, they don't have a guy who can do that. Chris Paul plays at many paces, but none of them are, breakneck speed like Russell Westbrook does. So that's an area where suddenly the Thunder are a little vulnerable, and they kind of need Adams, who they don't have massive rebounding centers behind him. Nerlens Noel can get a few, but he's not as strong as Adams. Don't have guards who are going to do what Westbrook's been doing. So there's a little bit of a hole there, and they're going to need him to be a factor getting those boards, not just at the offensive end, but also at the defensive end. So the last couple of years he's been averaging more offensive boards than defensive ones, and that's a crazy statistic when you look at the history of people doing that. Like I think Steph Curry had more defensive rebounds per game than Steven Adams last year, which is almost impossible to think of. Like he's just going to have to, but I mean, it was schematic, it was the way they played, but yeah, he's going to have to do more of that this year. So I think his rebounding numbers are going to be the ones that surge more than anything. And the reason I think he can stay a factor, because he's not a guy, well, you might see him shoot a few threes this season. He shot one in preseason just to get it out of the way with, just so he's capable. But I don't think that's going to be something they're going to do more than maybe like just odd every now and then trick play kind of things, just when it happens to be there. More often than not, you're going to see him still attacking the paint and whatever. But so he's not a guy who's going to create his own shots necessarily. But I think just having Chris Paul, who was, as we know, the architect of Lob City back in the day with the Clippers, having a genius point guard like that on the same team as him is going to unlock Steven Adams more as well. So he's just naturally going to get the ball in good areas more often. And he can finish. He knows what he's doing there. So as long as the Thunder are in this current incarnation of the team, we can talk about what we think they're going to be like in terms of pushing for the playoffs or whatever, but I think Steven Adams is definitely going to be not more of a role in terms of how the coach and the team see him, not any different sort of mindset from himself, but just statistically it's going to start reflecting more of the things that he does for the team. Because he leads the league in box outs most seasons, but he doesn't get those rebounds. Well, now you're going to see those rebound numbers probably swoop up. So I think that's the way where Steven Adams' impact is going to become just more obvious, I think, to the casual viewer.
And that's kind of typical of Steven Adams' career, in the sense that a lot of his value to the Thunder since he was drafted has been in aspects of basketball that aren't celebrated. Like, the media and fans are not going to be enjoying the way Steven Adams boxes out for his teammates, or the screens he sets for his teammates, and how he helps his teammates be the best that they can be, thus making the Thunder the best team that they can be. Whereas now, from the vibe I'm getting from your vibe, is that there could be a bit more space for recognition for Steven Adams, in the sense that the things that he's going to be doing are going to be more visible to those assessing games of basketball. So as you said, the next layer to his game might be shooting more, and that's easy to see. That's easy to quantify, is how many shots he's taking, his shooting percentage, and the number of rebounds that he's getting. And is that a correct assessment in terms of Steven Adams this season could get a bit more recognition because he has a different opportunity? Like, I don't think it's better or worse, it's just different. Like, he was doing his job for the team before, he's still going to do his job for the team now, but it could just be that his job now involves a few more sexier things and things that get people's attention more.
Absolutely, yeah. Like it's not that his job is, it's nothing's going to change for Steven Adams, I'll say that. Nothing's going to change for him. It's just that things have changed around him, which alters what that job is. So he's going to keep on doing his job. It's just that there are going to be slightly different parameters to that. And some of that will be every now and then he might have to shoot a three-pointer or a long two. And sometimes he's going to have to, be a little more aggressive at getting towards those defensive rebounds rather than just boxing out for someone else. And, all things he's very capable of. So things that, I think he will get more recognition because there's going to be this is not a like cut and dried thing. Danilo Gallinari was a borderline all-star last year as well. He's a really good player. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a guy who could really have a breakout season as well. I was just thinking of who else I could put on that sort of level. I don't think there is anyone else in this. I mean, maybe if Andre Robertson comes back and he's healthy, but he missed all the preseason despite people. I don't know. I don't even know what to think about that guy. Is the messages about him don't always seem to line up with the fact that he's not playing a lot of basketball at the moment. He still seems to be well short of full fitness. So no idea what's going on there, but. Yeah, I guess you could say someone like Terrence Ferguson or maybe even Darius Bazley, who's I think a rookie, and there's a couple options for guys who could be breakout players, but I doubt you'll see anything crazy from any of those guys. But yeah, so point being, I don't know that Steven Adams is obviously the second best player on the team. The best is Chris Paul, despite what anyone would say. The fact he's got a terrible contract does not make him a terrible player. His only issue with the Houston Rockets, he had two issues with the Houston Rockets. One was a personality clash with James Harden and some of the ways that they were doing things there. The other thing was he just couldn't stay healthy long enough and in key moments. So, if he hadn't got injured, I think the season before last when they played the Golden State Warriors in the playoffs, they might well have toppled the Dubs then and ended the dynasty a year ahead of time. So, it was only injuries that stopped him there. So Chris Paul is definitely the best player on the Thunder team. Steven Adams is borderline the second best. So, I mean, it depends on how things go. If Gallinari starts averaging 25 points a game, you shut the book on that one. But if Adams starts averaging like 18 and 12 or something like that, then maybe becomes a lot more obvious in his favor. The point being, he will get more recognition. I don't think we're going to be talking like all-star or all-defensive NBA kind of recognition, just because I think there's a lot of other good players in his position, and I think because the Thunder are in a bit of a precarious state where we don't quite know how they're going to go this season, I'm pretty confident he's going to be able to do what he's asked to do. But if he was doing that for a team that was winning 60 games, for sure you'd be looking at all-stars. If you were doing that for a team that's going to be struggling to win 45 and probably... I don't think they're going to, probably a lot less than that, because I don't think they're going to be making the playoffs in a very stacked Western Conference. You never know, though. There's a lot that could go, a lot that could happen over the course of a long NBA season. But yeah, fringe playoff team probably isn't having multiple All-Stars, so I don't know. But yeah, he's going to be a kind of guy. Every now and then, the talking heads on ESPN will have a big chat, or there'll be a feature on him when OKC's got a TV game. They'll be, who's playing really well this season is that Steven Adams, the center from New Zealand. Those kind of things will be happening, hopefully a little bit more often, because he's already got a bit of a name for himself. People know what he does, and he's probably been a bit of a undercover brother for a lot of people in the NBA. So if he is more prominent, then those people get to come out of the woodwork and say, "Sig, I told you, I've been saying for multiple years how good Steven Adams is. He was just being held back by Russell Westbrook's stat hoarding, that's all." Those kind of articles I think we're going to see a lot of.
Rightio, we'll slide over to the East where...
I might even write one myself.
Sean Marks is the boss dog of the Brooklyn Nets, and we'll just keep our discussion focused on Sean Marks. We don't need to go into how the Brooklyn Nets are going to, everything around the Brooklyn Nets is fairly obvious. It's like talking about the Clippers or the Lakers. Everything is out in the open. They have great players one might be injured. The other, they're going to be a good team, whatever. But I am very interested in Sean Marks, the person, because he did a great job in being Sean Marks when the Brooklyn Nets were on the rise to this point, and it was typically Sean Marks. It was Sean Marks making smart decisions, as we would expect a Kiwi basketball mind who has served a great apprenticeship at the San Antonio Spurs, goes to the Brooklyn Nets. Everything played out personally as I expected it, because we know what to expect from our Kiwi sports people and minds. And then if you get ingrained in an organization like the Spurs, it's only going to amplify those kind of Kiwi traits that we know, that we hold so dearly to us. Now it's a very different situation, and I am fascinated by how Brooklyn under Sean Marks and the moves Sean Marks makes in this. Like, everything changed drastically for Sean Marks. He was shining. He was doing an excellent job in rebuilding the Nets, laying the blueprint to a lot of other franchises on how to rebuild your organization. And then everything changed on the flip of a dime, and I'm just fascinated to see how Sean Marks leads the Brooklyn Nets under these new expectations, these new pressures that are there. What's your, how do you see Sean Marks flowing through this rather crazy phase for him and the Brooklyn Nets? Because it kind of feels like obviously the situation with the Nets changed drastically, but their whole culture and their whole ethos and how they go about their business also changed by being thrust into the spotlight, thrusted into signing two of the best players in the league. And it just seems like there was like a paradigm shift at the Brooklyn Nets. The common factor here is Sean Marks. So how do you view, from a Mother Aotearoa perspective, how do you view our favorite NBA mind rolling through this process with the Brooklyn Nets?
That's a bit of a $1,000,000 question, eh? I don't know. We're in uncharted territory here, aren't we? Because for all this time, he's been just like the really smart guy doing the under. It's a lot like the Steven Adams situation, actually, we're just talking about. Steven Adams doing a lot of things that people like coaches and teammates absolutely adore, like the little things, just not cutting any corners, doing things smartly, helping out his teammates, being a good bugger, and helping build a great culture in that team. And Marks has done similar things in Brooklyn at just like rebuilding this team from absolute scratch almost, and just doing clever things that clever basketball people and minds and writers and stuff can be like, Sean Marks is doing a good job there. Look at how he's maneuvered these little pieces and just slowly building up assets and taking this team into a position where they can be players in like the trade market or free agency. And it was a step-by-step process with him. But now they're in this weird, they're not climbing the mountain anymore. They're at the top of the mountain, and once you're there, you've got a pretty wide view, and there's a lot of things that are open to you. If you have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on the same team, guys are going to want to play around there. They already did with DeAndre Jordan. They had to sort of sign DeAndre Jordan as a bit of a package deal with those other two, which is a weird one because they already got Jared Allen, who was a guy who they drafted, they've put a lot of time into, a big center, shot blocking fiend, that guy. And also builds his own computers, so bit of an undercover genius himself as well. And also the best afro in the game. So Jared Allen's kind of, suddenly he's working with DeAndre Jordan. You can't play both of them at the same time because they're sort of, neither of them are stretch players, to put it lightly. Although DeAndre Jordan has learned how to shoot free throws in recent times, so that's nice. But there is a competition for minutes there suddenly, which has come from bringing in the big guys to this organization. And they've got this 1 year right now because Kevin Durant's injured. They're not going to be challenging for a title this year. They should be able to win a playoff series or two. So, they've still got a pretty strong team. And if you want to be a full-on basketball hipster, go around telling your mates how Karis LeVert is an underrated player and he could be an all-star this year because he's an underrated player and he could be an all-star this year. He's also on a fantastic contract for the team because he signed it at a time when he was still sort of coming through and he got injured and missed a lot of last year. And he's a great player. He could be real effective for them. And I think the thing with Kyrie Irving, people have made a big deal about how difficult he was at Boston. Honestly, I think that's just because Boston dominates a lot of the American sports media, and these people have heard stories from one side. But Kyrie Irving chose to play in Brooklyn. He wasn't traded there. He chose it. That was where he wants to be. It's an area that he grew up in as well, other than the time he was born in Melbourne, looking back even further. So, there's a lot of question marks about whether this upsets the delicate culture and the team first, everything that they'd been building up until this point. I think a lot of that is overrated and won't be as big of a deal as some people think it will be. However, we're in uncharted territory. How does Sean Marks handle this? We don't really know. Is he going to be super aggressive? Is he going to be like a Daryl Morey type and just go out there making trades, pulling triggers on everything, constantly looking to tinker and make the team better? Or is he going to go out offering big extensions to all the guys he's already got? They just gave Taurean Prince 2 years and $29 million really recently, a couple of days ago, which looks like a bit of a stretch, I thought, when I saw that. But, Kenny Atkinson, the coach, said specifically that, sometimes you just got to bet on players and trust that they're going to do what you hope they will. And I don't know. I don't know what to think of Sean Marks at this point. That's the enjoyment of having the new NBA season about to start, isn't it? Is that we get to find out. We get to stop speculating and actually sit back and put our feet up and start watching and learning.
That we certainly do, Wildcard. We will move into the New Zealand Breakers, and as we did with the Wellington Phoenix, just to keep things, to be honest, Wildcard, I just want to keep a lid on you here. I just want to just keep things aligned.
I ruffled some feathers in recent times with the Breakers chat, so yeah.
Oh, I mean, don't talk yourself up, crikey, Jack. You can't just come out here saying how what you're doing. Like, that's not very humble.
No, well, I might fit in with the Breakers then, because humility tends to be a traditional Breakers, Kiwi sports folk kind of trait. Less so now with the Breakers and their super hyped state that they are in these days.
Rightio, so we'll start with that angle first, considering you obviously got your knickers in a twist about it. But what I'm going to do, Wildcat, is I'm going to make a statement, and then all you have to do is say yes or no, just for this specific angle. Okay?
Yeah, this sounds
fun.
Do
you believe the New Zealand Breakers are moving away from a cultural identity that was very engaging with fans?
I mean, yes is the obvious answer, but what do you mean by engaging with fans?
Well, that was what the fans brought into the Breakers about, was the whole cultural
like community-minded sort of family atmosphere sort of thing. Yeah, well, yeah, definitely yes. They're still engaging with fans, but it's a different kind of...
Just a yes and no, Wildcard. We'll just keep a lid on you here. We'll keep your lid on you here.
Just clarifying.
Don't want you to cause a ruckus around anywhere else. Now, do you believe that this is because new American owners are being too American?
Yes.
Okay. We'll leave that there, and then we'll get onto the court here with the Breakers. I'm just trying to... 2 losses, was it, Wildcard? 2 losses to the Sydney Kings?
A loss and a loss. A loss away and a loss at home.
Yeah, rightio. So, New Zealand Breakers, 2 losses to the Sydney Kings. What is one thing that excites you about this Breakers team on the court?
Scotty Hobson, I would say. I mean, I'm tempted. I was about to say Scotty Hobson and Corey Webster, who both were excellent in the first game, not so much in the second game, with Sydney adjusted really well on them. But we know what Corey Webster can do. That's no secret. So I'm going to say Scotty Hobson because he's a guy who's like fringe NBA. We've talked about him heaps on podcasts. I've written about him plenty of times. He showed in that first game that he's capable of being like one of the best players in the NBL, as I was really hoping he would be. Second game not as dominant, but you got to hold things in check when you're playing against the championship favourites in your first 2 games of the season. But yeah, Scotty Hobson, super exciting.
Scotty Hobson. The Sydney Kings have won their first 4 games though, so maybe take... Obviously, 2 of those wins were against the Breakers, but tough start for the Breakers coming up against the Sydney Kings in their first 2 games. Tomorrow night, Thursday, they face the Illawarra Hawks, LaMelo Ball, and then Melbourne United, they are at home, and then they're away to Melbourne United on the Saturday. What is the biggest weakness of the Breakers at the moment from the first two games against the Sydney Kings?
I would say, because it's a little bit hard to judge a lot of the on-court stuff just because, well, for various reasons. I mean, there's a million reasons. They've just come back from the USA, which is tiring. They were playing their first games. Sydney had already had a couple under their belt, playing against a team that is probably I'd say head and shoulders above the rest of the competition at the moment in this first month of the season. Andrew Bogut was outstanding against the Breakers, and they don't have anyone who can stop him. Like, they just don't have a body they can put on him that can slow him down. So a lot of reasons why this is a tricky one. So I would say, just in general, like taking a step back, I think just the amount of transition that this team's gone through. They've got a new head coach. He's from Israel. He hasn't coached in this league before. He's got an assistant from Israel who just started this week. He's got another assistant from, a local fella from New Zealand, Zico Coronel, but he has never coached at this level before as well. They got a lot of players who are, all new imports. They got a 18-year-old starting point guard who's there on like a next star thing. He's obviously got his eye on the draft as well, trying to make a name for himself as well as winning games for the thing, which, I mean, that's not been a problem for the Breakers or anything. He's just taking care of business. But, he's still an inexperienced first-year pro. Just so much has changed, and so much has been just this level of instability around the club. I think that is easily their biggest weakness right now, and it's why it's hard to make too many judgments, especially this early on. But even like in a month's time, we're still going to be ironing things out where Dan Shamir's still going to be putting his touches to the squad and trying to get guys playing in the way he wants them to play and all these kind of things. So it's just, that's the big problem, is that they're they're coming off a transitional year, and they're still transitioning out of that transitional year. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure how that goes down the long run, but right now we can't really say anything other than that about them, is that everything is qualified by the fact that so much has changed, and they're in such a state of flux right now that it's going to take a long time for the dust to settle.
I've been quietly, I wouldn't say like tuning in hardcore, but quietly tuning into LaMelo Ball with the Illawarra Hawks. From what I've seen, I really like watching LaMelo Ball in the NBL, and this leads me into a question about RJ Hampton, and this leads me into a greater idea that I've had that we won't have time for today, but just having some of these players come into the NBL, I think is like pretty cool. It's kind of awkward because they're only going to be here for 1 year, and that's going to make things tricky moving forward. But from what I have seen, those two are making a strong case to other American players to come down to the NBL, forgo college basketball, and get a year of professional basketball to their name. Because like, I'm watching LaMelo Ball, he is grabbing big rebounds against grown men, and I just think like that, playing that kind of basketball is going to be fantastic for your development, let alone, Australia, New Zealand, they're nice places. The league is fairly solid. There's no dramas compared to like Europe or other countries around the world. So, I'm enjoying LaMelo Ball. I'm enjoying watching RJ Hampton as well for the New Zealand Breakers, but I'll throw it back to you to finish with, what have you made from RJ Hampton in these opening rounds with the Breakers? Has he been exciting you? Has it been a bit disappointing? How are you feeling about the RJ Hampton excursion to Aotearoa? Only 2 games, so again, you can't make too many big judgments, and as you have alluded to, there's a bit of drama, not dramas, but a bit of kerfuffle around the Breakers at the moment. But yeah, just how are you feeling about RJ Hampton and the impact he has had with the Breakers in those first 2 games?
Well, first of all, I think if your GM leaves a month out from the season and your assistant coach quits a week out from the season, you can class that as dramas. I don't think that's unfair to say. RJ Hampton has been expectedly inconsistent. There's certain, like, he is an 18-year-old playing against 10-year pros and stuff like that. It doesn't get much harder than coming up against a guy like Andrew Bogut, who and some of the senior guys that the Sydney Kings have in that team. And They bullied him a bit. They picked on him. They forced him off the court in crunch time, to be honest. And when RJ Hampton, early on in both those games, he was busy and he was managing to play a big part in the offense. And when he's doing that, like, he's so skilled. He's just he's a great passer. He's fantastic at just like moving around. Brilliant athlete. That stuff is supremely exciting, and that's exactly what we want to see from him and enjoying from him. But unfortunately, like, he's also a rookie defending against really big guys who know exactly what they're doing and are going to pick on him, and the Sydney Kings did that, and you didn't see a lot of crunch time minutes from Hampton. He played a little bit in the first game, and Casper Ware just went at him, and I forget the other guy's name, the other import, Jay Sean something or other. These guys just picked on him, and they made life tough for him. Dan Shamir had to take him out of the game and rolled with Sick Henry the rest of the way. Second game, I think he was off the court for the last 6 minutes of the fourth quarter in the second game, and this was at a time where the Breakers were absolutely just anemic on offense, like really struggling to do anything. I think they scored about 5 points in the last 9 minutes of the game, or I think 8 minutes and 55 seconds. They scored 5 points and shot something like 2 of 17 over that time, and let a small lead slip into a double-digit defeat, which was really disappointing. But again, it's one of those things. They don't know how to manufacture their offense yet. They don't know how to just create a shot when they need one, because everyone's still getting used to playing with each other and not a lot of ball movement and these kind of things. And those are the reasons as well why I would have liked to see RJ Hampton out there at that time, but just too raw on defense. Couldn't keep up with guys. Couldn't stop them from getting past him, and ultimately that meant he didn't play a lot in that game. So yeah, it's up and down. Like, the stuff we thought he'd be good at, he's great at. The stuff we thought he'd struggle with, he's struggling with, and that's expected. And you can anticipate a bit of growth over the course of the season. And he's in a different situation to LaMelo Ball, who's on a less competitive team, I would argue, which means he's got more freedom to just do whatever he wants. So he's going to put up crazy stats, but also LaMelo Ball is, I think first few weeks is becoming last few weeks. I mean, it's probably relatively obvious that LaMelo Ball is a step or two ahead of RJ Hampton, and I think the draft predictions, when people start coming through from those, you're going to see Hampton sort of hanging around 10 to 15 kind of range, and LaMelo Ball top 5. But that could change real quickly,
I like that because also for some reason I like the Ball brothers, so I'm also really interested in how Lonzo Ball goes for the New Orleans Pelicans. So
same.
And it's just good for my eye test as well, because I watched a few highlights packages with the Illawarra Hawks, and watching LaMelo Ball and his passing, his size, his rebounding, his shooting. Like, just from highlights, obviously, so they're only picking out the good things, but it just looks good. He looks like an athlete. He looks like I love basketball players who pass the ball, so I like all that stuff. So I like LaMelo Ball wildcard. So unless you've got anything to finish with, we'll wrap it up.
One last point on that, because you're talking about Lonzo Ball on the Pelicans. I'd just like to point out, just to wrap it all up in a nice little bow here, in a nice little package, Lonzo Ball copped a bit at the Lakers, big spotlight, huge spotlight on him in that time. Didn't always go so well. Had people questioning relative aspects of his game and sometimes his personality, these kind of things. The off-court stuff with his dad as well certainly doesn't help. So obviously that's a difficult situation for a young player. I'd just like to point to people thinking that Lonzo Ball is the finished product and won't have a big breakout season with the Pelicans in a much better role that'll suit him better. I'd just like to point out the example of a guy called D'Angelo Russell, who was rescued from the LA Lakers under very similar circumstances in terms of like the spotlight he was on, the struggles he was having, by Sean Marks to the Brooklyn Nets, was then an all-star last season, signed a max contract. He's now the Golden State Warriors, where he's going to be covering the distance until Klay Thompson comes back to fitness towards the end of the season. After that, I guess he's the sixth man or whatever. But yeah, pretty good case study for Lonzo Ball haters out there to see. That's, D'Angelo Russell thrived once he got away from the Lakers. Lonzo Ball has every opportunity to do the same thing as well.
And that's reason for hope that guys like Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving can go to the Brooklyn Nets under Sean Marks and get better, and maybe earn a bigger contract as well, and the Sean Marks effect will be felt around the NBA.
Yeah, it goes both ways. No reason not to think so. I mean, those contracts are going up anyway, as long as China don't back out of the thing. But that's a whole situation separately, I think. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Niche Cast. We'll wrap it up there and come back soon for Rugby League, International Rugby League coming up. We got Plunket Shield Cricket on at the moment as well, so a couple more podcasts coming at you this week. Stay tuned to your feed. If you made it this far, jump on Patreon, support us on Patreon. It's the best way to support us on Patreon. We do little podcasts for our patrons only, and we've got all sorts of other goodies planned. So again, the best way to support the Niche Case is right up the gut, straight to the front door. Run it straight, offer your generosity, and we will return it to you in kind. Kia kaha, stay beautiful, cheer cheer.